get stuck to my mask, so I just don't. I'm going to show you when it happens. I'm just going to do it.
Did you just not do it?
He did.
I'll do it. You can make it. Good, right? Are we starting now? I think I heard the knock, so welcome everyone. Today is April 26th, and this is the Administrative Committee regular meeting. And we will start with approval of the April 12th Administrative Committee minutes.
I like them. Mm-hmm. Same here.
All right, me too. So those are passed. We'll move on to item number 2, which is the personnel policy updates, pay and leave sections. And we must have Jen here on Zoom. Hi, Jen.
Hello. Thank you all. What I thought I would do is just pull up a screen share of the document that was included in packets. And we can scroll through these. It's 27 pages, but there are not 27 pages worth of strict policy updates. So as soon as I can share my screen, we'll give the high points of those. Can everybody see that with leaves of absence at the top?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay.
Tyler.
So a lot of these policies weren't changed. They were updated to maybe have language that was a little bit more understandable. Not any significant changes outside of those that I'll go over with you today. We also updated to more specific and current terms. I think as I've mentioned in previous policy presentations, the last full set of adopted policies was back in 2014. So we're working just with some updates to that land. So this leave of absence just simply clears up some confusion and lays out a little bit more clearly the federal and state laws that we include when we're looking at leave in general. So this first section focuses primarily on leave. Leave approval, this doesn't change. No new updates here, other than you'll see in areas where before approval for certain things was only allowed by the city supervisor, we've included the deputy city supervisor in some of those approvals as well. So that would occur in this section. Right off the bat, one of the biggest changes that you'll see that are proposed in these policies is a paid parental leave policy. Given just the progress that we make as a community and as a city, this is something that would be fairly new in a local government setting. It's also something that's becoming more and more common in the private sectors. This would be a policy that would allow new parents, say we have one parent at the city of Moscow, the other parent works elsewhere. That parent, due to the birth or adoption of a child, they would receive 4 weeks of parental leave, 4 work weeks. So they would have to take that within the first 12 weeks of the birth or adoption. The intent of the policy is to provide a scenario where parents are able to spend that quality time with their children in bonding, those types of things, especially in those first weeks. And then also to provide some financial support. In a lot of instances, we'll have people who will use, as we've typically done in the past, their vacation, sick leave, all of their other leave in support of maternity leave or paternity leave, or in cases of adoption as well, to spend that time with that family. Well, a lot of times those people, when they have new babies that are coming into the household, new people that are coming into the household, if you exhaust your sick leave and you have a young child, you're going to have a need for sick leave as well. So it puts them in a position where it gets tight, it gets nerve-wracking. So we want to provide that comfort and a bit of sustainability when it comes to helping our parents, birth, adoption, whichever route, get through that new process and do it with a little less stress than they would typically. The other item in this, say if we had 2 employees that were working for the city of Moscow, they could take that leave. They would have to schedule it with their supervisors. If it works out for them to take it at the same time, great. If not, that needs to be worked out. And then any employee working 30 hours per week, where we typically have they're not half-time entirely, but they work about 60 of the 80 hours in a pay period, we would prorate those benefits. And we do that similarly with our medical benefits, vacation, and all of that. So that's well within that. This policy would not take any place of any FMLA or anything like that. This would simply be a policy of the city that we would provide that benefit to our employees. I might pause there for a moment. This is probably the biggest and most substantial proposal in this document. So I might pause there, and if there's any questions or comments.
I do have one. Jen, in this, I think this is a great addition, by the way. In this moment where there are two parents who are both employees of the city, can one donate time off to the other to make?
We do not have, we don't have that in place for any of our employees, whether it's under this policy or another. We like to address those issues in the sick leave bank. If there is an employee that is in dire need of leave, it's typically medically related. So we use that sick leave bank as kind of that caveat if a person's in need. But no, we do not have a provision for allowing one employee to donate to the other in any situation.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Sandra?
Yeah, and Jen, my question is, do we limit this at all to one time per year? Could it happen twice in 1 year? Does that matter?
We haven't put the only limit that we put on it is that the leave must be taken within the first 12 weeks of the birth or adoption.
Okay.
So we wouldn't, we hadn't considered having to do that. This certainly could be something that we also monitor. And if we see something like that, and it's something that, I think this policy, I should go back. I think this policy would be used, pretty rarely. We still have, new kids coming into the city of Moscow all the time. We don't have such a large employee base that this is something that we have someone out with new kiddos all the time. But we can certainly monitor it, and if that becomes more of an issue, we could address it.
Yeah, I don't see it a huge issue clearly, but it could be. And I just, keeping an eye on it is all. I think this
Absolutely.
is a great addition, so thanks.
If somebody had two babies in a year, they probably really need that additional leave.
But you're also talking adoption, so,
Yes.
you could have a lot on one of, so I'm just thinking outside the box a little, but this is great. This is a great addition.
I have one question about the eligible parent definition.
No.
I'm wondering if there could be something about like a primary caregiver, because I can think of examples where it's not a biological parent or a same-sex spousal equivalent or a new adoptive parent. In the example that it may be a grandparent who is suddenly the primary caregiver acting as a parent, or a partner of the biological person who is not married. I don't know. Can that somehow be added, a primary caregiver or a parental role, or I don't know what that wording would be, but.
I see. So for instance, I think maybe guardian, primary caregiver, something along those lines.
Right.
If, for instance, a grandparent is all of the sudden finds themselves as the primary caregiver for a child. I certainly could play with some of that language and bring it back to council if this moves forward. Back to committee.
That would be great, just to, not have to have someone try to make the case for them qualifying.
I will say one of the things that we are working on is a better list of definitions when it comes to our policy. The definition for parent, for instance, is really outdated in our current policies. So that is kind of a document that keeps evolving off to the side that I'm working on, but certainly we could look at that. And if it's not something that we feel we could do, we could make that mention at council, or like I said, if it comes back to committee.
Maybe something about domestic partners too. They might not always be the biological parent, but they may not be legally married, but they are acting as the domestic partner in a parental role. I'm not.
Absolutely.
So good luck. Thank you for
Great
looking
point.
into that.
Great point. So anything else in particular to this proposed policy?
Anything else?
Not for me.
All right.
All right. So these next ones will go pretty quickly. Bereavement is a policy that we're not proposing change. We do provide for 3 days of paid bereavement leave, and an additional 5 days, looking at sick leave, providing that option. Of course, we work with every employee in these situations. But nothing there has changed. Jury duty, also no change. Jury duty is a situation where an employee serves their jury duty time. We keep them in full pay status, and we ask that they turn their jury pay over to the city. So they're only getting paid from one source, but they I mean, all the deductions, the medical insurance, Percy accumulations, all that fun stuff just stays constant. I don't believe we'll see an area where jury duty will pay more than what the city would pay an employee in those instances as well. So we want to make sure that they stay whole when they're doing those duties. And we sure appreciate it when our citizens do that. So. Hours of work. This is pretty simple, or shouldn't say simple, pretty in keeping with what we've already got in place. There is one note that I will make, and that is employee attendance at lectures, meetings, and training programs. We have never called out training time, or excuse me, travel time for training as paid time for that. So particularly, we'll say in our current policy, we have a stipulation where if, say, 4 people are going to a training, the driver, that person's time will count, but the other 3 people in the car, that time does not count towards that for pay status. Well, in that instance, it's pretty hard for those 3 people to do anything else but be in that car. So wanted to update our policy there to say when you're traveling to and from required training, that would also count as paid time off. This also factors into our flexible scheduling, those types of things. So if you have to travel, Sunday, say your conference is on a Friday, you travel Thursday, you do your conference Friday, you travel back on Saturday. You could also just not work on Monday and your hours would still balance. So that's the other way we address it. But we make sure that time counts for those employees because there's not, like I said, not much else you can do when you're on the way to and from some of these training activities.
I have a question about that, Jen.
You bet.
So I understand the flexing. Could this mean, though, that if they didn't want to flex and they traveled on a Sunday, that they would be getting overtime for that Sunday travel?
They would need to get pre-approval through their supervisor for that. And typically that would not be the case. Yeah. There may be an opportunity for comp time. I would say that because if they need that person to work the next day, comp time would absolutely be an option. Overtime could be an option, but that would require pre-approval. It wouldn't be up to the individual employee to choose.
Yeah, in general, just from my experience in other places of working with that type of benefit, I think you can get into a little bit of a problematic area if people are sort of motivated to plan travel on a non-work day so that they get paid time and a half. And I understand what you're saying, that it has to be director's approval, but I think the idea of flexing is a much better way to compensate those times where you do have to travel on a weekend, rather than sort of incentivizing someone to get some overtime for booking their travel in that way.
I can imagine any one of our managers, if they know their person has a training on Tuesday and they see that they've booked a flight for Sunday, that would be a no thank you. Even that Sunday night hotel wouldn't qualify because if you only need to be there the night before, those costs would not qualify to be covered by hours of work. I think where we would run into this instance, I think back to the police department when we were pretty significantly understaffed 2 years ago, when we had folks coming to and from post, those kinds of things. Those we would have loved to be able to flex that for those folks, but some of those people who are already on the road and certified and were going to post after they had FTO'd, we needed to have them working. So that would be an instance where it would be either a comp time or an overtime situation. But for the most part, the way travel is managed, the time would be flexed, or it would just be a simple, there's no other way around it. We'll have to do a comp time or an overtime. And of course, with exempt employees, this doesn't apply at all. It would only be non-exempt employees that would apply to.
Great.
Okay, rest and meal periods. This is not different. No changes here. Rest and meal periods. Idaho does not require employers to give breaks for meals. However, we do. And so we've got rest periods, we've got meal periods. Those again are flexed by probably department and by division is probably the best way to explain it. I know in certain situations, there's not an opportunity to take a break. Well, it's not a hard and fast requirement that minute. We flex that. We just want to make sure that people are able to take a breather when they need to make sure that they stay safe and can continue to do good work. So, but no change there. We haven't had any issues with it in the past. And yeah. Attendance and punctuality, excuse me, again, no change. Attendance is required, punctuality is required. We've got some provisions for inclement weather. We do expect employees to work unless the city declares there's an emergency closing, which we've done a few times in the past, not many, thankfully. let's see here. There is disciplinary action that is tied with this policy. I think that's important to note. And we allude to or say that there is a disciplinary action option, and then we'll spell that out in the next batch of policies you all should see in the next month or two. So, yeah, no changes there. Overtime. We have not changed our overtime policy. We do have FLSA and those types of recommendation or requirements noted in here. This would apply to non-exempt employees as defined by the Fair Labor Standards Act. Pay is at 1.5 times of the regular rate of pay for all hours worked in excess of 40 hours per week. We do, with our work period, have 80 hours in a pay period, but you may not work 50 hours the first week of the pay period and then work 30 hours of the second week of the pay period, unless you are in public safety. They do have some different flexibility within an FLSA defined work period there. So in those instances, this is where our comp time comes into play again, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But as employees work more than 40 hours in a week for whatever reason it may be, they can take that as comp time or as overtime as approved by their supervisor. They may also flex those hours to avoid overtime or comp time, depending on what the situation is and what's going on in that department or division.
Jen, can I ask you a question on that part?
Yes, please.
So, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but it's always a question I have wherever I work. When we're talking about comp time or flex time versus overtime, are you allowing that comp time as time and a half? So if I worked a Saturday for 8 hours, do I get
Cost to share with the University of Idaho for their reimbursement for those types of events. Employees are always paid for their comp time upon termination or when they end their employment with us. We do note that if an employee selects comp time, they can't go back later and say, nope, I want it in cash now. We do limit that because that could be a huge financial situation for us to get into. So we do have that note. Most of this has not changed. I don't think any of the compensatory time has changed. So this takes us, this is where pay and leave gets a little intertwined. So this is the actual comp time, that was comp pay. So if you're taking comp time, one of the things, you cannot earn comp time in 1 week and use it in the second week of one pay period. It has to be earned, it has to be on the books at the end of a pay period, and then it's available to use. We do require that any employee request their comp time off at least 48 hours in advance. Comp time is one of those things that the FLSA regulates. It's very specific to local governments or to governments and some nonprofits. It's not something you find often in the private sector. But with that, they say that every effort must be made to permit an employee to take that time off unless it causes undue burden. And that would be, oh, sorry, I just got an echo. I thought somebody was repeating it back to me. That would be something that we would have to monitor as we go. So we do have in here, if there's a situation where an employee is asking for comp time, is trying to schedule their comp time, and we are unable to, we as the city would be able to pay that out. So we put that on the city side. With that way we can always say, okay, we are giving you the benefit that you have earned as required by the Fair Labor Standards Act. So, let's see here. And then we talked about week to week. Oh, payroll and time records. Payroll does happen every 2 weeks. Nothing has changed in this policy overall, just to update some titles and things like that. Here is the other item that we have changed pretty dramatically. Our inactive duty or training military leave policy is pretty brief in our current policy. What we've done here is include 3 options for those folks who are in, per se, National Guard or something like that. We've got during the period of leave, and this would be something that is under, I gotta remind myself, about 3 40-hour work weeks. So 30 days, give or take. So if they've got a training leave that's 30 days or less, the city may choose to be paid their regular rate, including all their benefits and all that, treat it as jury duty pretty much, turn their guard payment or whatever military service payment over to the city. The city continues to pay the employee as is. The second option would provide a small amount of leave without pay for an employee. Here, we looked at 20 hours or more in any week, and that provides payroll the ability to pay any deductions or employee costs that come through payroll. That's benefits on insurance, those types of things. Let's see here. They could also, if say they only work an actual 15 hours or they only take 15 hours, in comp time, they can use vacation. They just have to have 20 hours in pay status. So any combination of those things would work. And then they can keep their guard pay and they keep their own payroll pay. And let's see, an employee may take vacation also by taking, if they take vacation to do their training leave, that works out perfectly. They keep both the pay. We just want to make sure that, again, they're not either always training for military or always working for the city. So well, let me back up. Any questions on the inactive or training military leave?
No.
Okay. This one was great. EAC has been involved in the review of all of these policies, but we got such great feedback on this one to provide these 3 different options, whereas before we were just kind of winging the process as we went along, depending on the employee's needs. So this provides that background to do it really well into the future.
Jen, before you go back, even before the first military leave, we talk about multiple chances to schedule comp time usage.
Oh, yeah.
What does multiple mean?
We've never run into it. Usually we are able to provide that time off. The closest we came to that being an issue was with the PD when we were understaffed.
I think that it would be good to quantify, if at all possible, just to be clear. Repeated requests says to me 2, but it might say to my supervisor 12. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Yep,
I just think a quantity would be good there, just to be clearer.
that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I don't think I mentioned this under comp time. We only allow 80 hours accrued of comp time.
Okay.
That's the cap. But yeah, having an amount, a number of times requested before, we're like, yeah.
I think I would mention something in there too about 80 hours accrual.
We do. I'm sorry, we do have it.
Okay, I don't know that I read it, but it's, yeah, okay.
Yeah, we put it in both. Let's see here. Oh, active duty military leave. This is mostly the requirements here are outlined by USERA, which is Uniform Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. We've had several employees who serve and have fallen under this. Also falls into how we retain their job for them if they're gone for an extended period. In these instances, the service person typically has a better deal with health insurance with the guard or whoever it may be. We do provide COBRA for them or the opportunity for COBRA paid by the employee for their duration of their leave if they need that. And we hold their job. But then in this instance, we would not do full pay, benefits, all that. We just want to make sure we give them the opportunity to keep benefits. And we want to make sure that they've got everything taken care of on their end for insurance if they make a change in that area. So, yeah. No change there. This is, in our current policy, we provide an opportunity for our employees who are also Moscow Volunteer Fire Department members to respond to calls if they're in a position that, and not necessarily in a position, if the call comes out and they're able to respond to the call at that time. So if if we've got someone doing a water leak or a major street overhaul and they're, in asphalt out to their eyeballs, they can't get away, then we would expect them to stay and finish that project. But if they are in a different situation where they can get away, we do encourage our employees to respond to those call outs. And we'd hope that all of our organizations in the community would do that as well. So thought we should model that. Oh, that does not apply to overtime as well. That one does not. Discretionary leave, this is for exempt employees only. And we just updated this to say the city supervisor could approve that or deputy city supervisors. And this would be an instance, like we talked with training. If somebody had to travel on Saturday, they're an exempt employee, they have to be at work on Monday. They go to a council meeting that night as well. So that by Friday, you've put in more than enough time, your work is caught up, all of that kind of stuff. That just provides that discretion for discretionary leave to the deputy city supervisors and the city supervisor. Let's see, holidays, all the same. No changes here. Same with the floating holiday. Vacation is the same as well. We did add an extra column for what an exempt employee accrual looks like. So That is just a bit higher than our non-exempt employees from the start. So we clarified that. We have a cap of vacation at 240 hours. We did include an option for employees to request an additional 40 hours over the 240. We're finding that some of those folks with those higher accruals, it gets tough to use some of those accruals depending on what's going on in the department or division at that time. So we provided that. We manage that on a year-to-year basis, on a month-to-month basis, really at whose vacation levels are where, to make sure people are getting that time off. They're recharging, they're coming back with a fresh set of eyes, all of those types of things. Let's see here. For disability leave, no changes there. This is also some of the ICRIMP recommended language that they provide. Sick leave is no changes here. We've got, we added some of the clarification, 3.69 hours of sick leave per pay period. It just cleaned it up a little bit, nothing major. As with all leave, we mentioned this with comp time, it has to be earned and on the books before you can take it. So we do note that misuse of sick leave is cause for disciplinary process. The biggest change here, and I'll just give it a little highlight right here. In our current policy, we provide the opportunity for some sick leave payout upon a city leaving the employment in good standing. Its current cap of sick leave is 960 hours. The payout is, I stumble on this formula every time. So if you say you have maxed out your sick leave at 960 hours, you less that by 360 hours, and then 25% of that balance would be available to the employee up to $5,000, which would be not an issue. Difficulty of the formula is not an issue, but there are instances where either a person never gets to that level of accrual or are at a pay rate that is such that they don't see any buyout at all. The plan with this proposal is to provide an opportunity for each employee to see some percentage of that payout, regardless of where they land there, especially if they're an employee that's leaving in good terms. Some folks, they can build up that 960 hours after being here for, 10, 15 years. We've got other employees who, for whatever reason, have had issues, or maybe they're the primary caregiver, and so their kids use sick leave. So we want to balance that out so that whatever amount you have when you leave the city, there's some percentage that you could earn back. And we like to use that as also an incentive for folks to bank that sick leave. That really is an insurance policy. It's not leave due to an employee to be used in full. It's there for those sick leave, medical type related issues. So we changed it to a simple 15% of the value of the sick leave hours that an employee has accumulated. We came up with the 15. That's about, if you assume that you had maxed out your sick leave bank at 960 hours, you apply the formula at a variety of levels a variety of pay levels. It's about 15 to 16% if you've met all those requirements. So that with the 15% and then finance around the numbers on what that impact would be, and that's manageable. So that would be the other big note here. Maybe I'll stop there. Any questions? Okay.
Good.
All right, sick leave bank. This is that other program we alluded to. So sick leave bank is in place in case of significant medical concerns or issues that an employee is dealing with, and that would include them taking time to care for their immediate family. So catastrophic injury or illness it's the basic heading. We try to be broad and flexible. Different situations pop up all the time that we could never anticipate. We do not provide sick leave bank to folks that we feel maybe are suspected of sick leave abuse. That we would have that run to ground much in advance of someone having a sick leave bank request. They would have already been on the radar by that point to know, okay, are they dealing with something? Is there something else going on? Maybe an abuse situation. I'm really proud of our managers and how they work through that process with their employees by staying on top of them and just making sure everybody's taking care of themselves, that there isn't something major going on that we could support them in if we knew more about it, in an appropriate know more about it type of way. Human Resources does manage the sick leave bank. What we require is that all City of Moscow employees donate 8 hours, and we'll collect that from an employee within their first year of employment. We don't take their first 8 hours of sick leave accrued because they may need that for something. But Kelly does an excellent job of tracking who's accrued what and when they can donate. newly hired employees are good after the completion of their introductory period. We do ask that our employees, when they first join us, regardless sick leave of all those types of things, if they need leave, we'll absolutely give it to them. We're not okay with an employee starting and then saying, hey, oh, week after next, I'd like to take a week off to go rafting or something like that. We really want them to immerse themselves and get up to speed with the city of Moscow for about 6 months. That saying, if somebody says, I've got a family reunion, it's been on the books for a year, so absolutely, we will accommodate for that in the hiring process. So we do require that unless, sick leave is one of those things that is much more flexible. If someone's sick, we don't want them to come in and get other people sick, those types of things. But those vacation things, we do put off for about 6 months to get everybody really as up to speed as possible, as soon as possible in those instances. So criteria, this is another thing. This kind of gives us a little bit, we, again, try to keep it broad. This does include maternity leave type things. There's, in addition to the paid parental leave. So there's definitely a medical side to maternity leave as well. And so we address that here rather than in the paid parental leave policy. Let's see here. We do require that an employee uses all of their other leave before hitting up the sick leave bank. That is not to say that when they're done with everything, they'll have zero balances and everything. We try to work with them so that we can get them to where they're building that leave up again. But this is, like I said, catastrophic. These are major situations that are happening in a person's life. And we want to try to get them through that as best as possible. So let's see here. And then Family and Medical Leave Act, I could go through the next 3 pages, but I'll give you the brief overview because there's not much we can do with the Family and Medical Leave Act other than follow it. This is provided by the U.S. Department of Labor. They've got some great guides. Their eligibility is outlined. You have to work for at least 12 months or 1,250 hours. You saw that figure earlier in the paid parental leave policy as well. We took some of the language and requirements from FMLA when drafting the paid parental leave. And it really is job protection for a variety of reasons. It's everything from birth of eligible newborn children, adoption, care of immediate family member, their own serious health condition. This is a newer piece, any exigency arising out of the fact that a spouse, son, or daughter, or parent of the employee is on covered active duty in the armed forces. I think this is a newer piece. We haven't had any requests in this vein yet, but certainly have it in the policy as required. Excuse me. Obligations, honestly, is taken straight from FMLA's website. How to do this in practice is an employee requests FMLA leave for the particular reason. They fill out the form. Human Resources then fills out the form that says, yes, you're approved for this. We need this documentation or that documentation. We swap about 6 or 7 other forms, it seems like. But in those instances, again, jobs are protected. It's the practice of the city, even without filling out the forms, but we do have the process in place and we follow that process when the occasion is appropriate. Rights and obligations, again, it's National Defense Authorization Act that speaks to that military piece that is a newer piece that I wasn't aware of, that is definitely something that we abide by as well. So that, in probably too fast a summary, is 27 pages of pay and leave policies as updated and proposed for your consideration. Any other questions?
Any questions?
I just have one more question, and I apologize if you already mentioned this, I just don't remember. But is a person able to donate any vacation time to the sick leave bank?
No, it's only sick leave. Vacation and sick leave are tracked very differently when it comes to financial record keeping.
I see. Okay, that's it for me, thanks.
I have a somewhat related or question to your topic here. It's not specifically to this document, but do the different departments, I know in budgeting, it may be in the other department as well, but I know we see the overtime in the police report when it comes time for the budgets. Are the department directors running regular reports of how much overtime is coming out of their department and how often, just to track and compare year to year to contribute towards looking at staffing if there's a lot of overtime? Do you have some system for that?
Absolutely. We do that with seasonals as well.
Okay.
So you've got on one end, you've got your full-time staff that are getting overtime. And then on the other hand, you've got seasonals that maybe you're adding seasonal positions or hours there. So we look at both ends of that spectrum to say, okay, what's the most efficient way to do that with the different staffing choices we have. And yeah, department heads, creators of those budgets, they do manage their overtime specifically, and those figures are based on historical figures. If we know something's coming up, so they are managed regularly.
So the department director will know in a pretty timely way if something is creeping up
Yes.
in an unusual amount.
Yeah. Well, and you'll also see it through timesheet approval as well. As those supervisors are approving timesheets, they'll see it and they should know about it before it hits that timesheet. But that's another time and another moment where they can say, okay, that's adding up. What's going on here? They should be anticipating it in advance. And I feel like I think we do that pretty well.
Okay, thank you. So what do you need from us here, Jen?
So I would be happy to look at the definition in the paid parental leave. And then also the other item that I noted. And
Quantifying repeated.
up here. It is Gina's other item. Making those changes as track changes. And then if the committee is comfortable moving that to council, or if you'd like me to bring those changes back to committee.
I'm good.
I think we can go with those changes to council.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you. Just a few more sections to go. This was probably this was the heaviest lift. Pay and leave is the biggest chunk of our policies. The next piece will be disciplinary, but that one follows practice. It follows process really well. But they're all significant, but that'll be one of the next ones. We've also got the category that I'm calling rules at this moment. It's employees and rules about smoking in vehicles, which is a no thank you, which is cell phones in vehicles, some of those types of things. We'll also have a new social media policy that'll be coming forward, but I anticipate I'll be able to bring those back here in the next couple of months to get this entire document wrapped up. I did note in the CCSR that the policies as they are approved by council are being put into action, and then we will come back and share a final beautiful document with you at the end when all those sections have been in play.
All right. Whew. Thank you.
Thank you.
So then we're ready to move on to next item on our agenda is the public art guidelines for 2021, and we have Megan Cherry to present for us today.
So is everybody in the room, or should I be, can I just go to presentation view from here? Is that? Yeah, nobody's zooming at this point? Okay.
You will need to share your screen.
Probably for anybody that's watching.
For anybody
Yeah.
that's watching?
Yeah,
Okay.
'cause we're broadcasting it, Megan.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Is that set correctly? All right.
It looks good to me. I'm not sure what's happening out there in the rest of the world, but
Corey,
got it right.
Corey will come running out of the back
Okay.
room if I need my village. All right. Good afternoon. Thank you for the time today. I'm bringing Public Art Guidelines 2021 today, which is exciting. It's the second in a three-part series of public art foundational documents, and so we started that series with the public art maintenance plan last month, and so now we're looking at guidelines. I thought it was probably a good idea for us to start today by looking at the purpose for public art, the public art program, and this program is truly oriented to providing access to the arts is probably one of the biggest common threads throughout all of the work that we're doing is to provide access to the widest swath of the community as possible. But that's also about diversity of artistic styles and appearances and perspectives. So that's truly the purpose of these guidelines, which do get very technical, but they're all in service of this overarching goal. Just to put this in context, the public art collection is actually sizable at this point. We have 88 artworks in the portable collection. That was the first addition to Moscow's public art collecting process. Since the original guidelines were written in 2011, we've added 2 entire collections, the vinyl wraps and the Intermodal Transit Center Sculpture Garden. And so these guidelines really provide a foundation for additions to accessions and deaccessions maintenance of this collection. A bit of history. So the Moscow's first public art guidelines were written and adopted in 2011. So 10 years ago, the Public Art Subcommittee of the Moscow Arts Commission and then City Arts Director Kathleen Burns collaborated to develop these public art guidelines. They were approved and they guided the accession of all of the portable collection pieces, the inclusion of every vinyl wrap, every transit center sculpture garden, and permanent collection pieces, Helioterra, Inspiration and Pollination at the library, and recently the Homecoming that was installed last July. And so the 2021 guidelines update, this became clear that this was needed to respond appropriately to the program growth. And again, this was developed collaboratively by the MAC, the Public Art Subcommittee, and me as City Arts Program Manager. So at this point, we are recommending annual updates to these guidelines based upon what's discovered in each year's process. We don't anticipate that being a huge heavy lift on an annual basis, but that will keep this document fresh and in alignment with what's happening in the program. I've broken out some of the highlights from the guidelines document and really wanted to start with the program goals. This is from the very first page of the guidelines. Here I'm highlighting those that were in existence in the 2011 guidelines document and are still present in the 2021 guidelines. We see the very first point, broadening the role of the artist in the community. That's probably one of the most important goals of the arts department's work as a whole. And so that's certainly something that we're keeping. Every other one of the goals in this area we're keeping, and then also adding the following. And at the risk of taking a little bit of extra time, I would like to talk through each of these additions. So when we say that we are increasing awareness of public arts value as well as selection and management processes, the reason that that is important is that it's this outreach piece to the community, but also for all of the team members who help to make public art happen. So whether that's Arts Commission members, selection panel members, or just members of the community, we want people to be aware of how programs like this work. This program really prioritizes artist and community member input already built into our accessions into the any of the collections is a robust method of having community members on selection panels. In the case of permanent collection accessions, we have public input sessions. And so it's really to make sure that the program is transparent and reflective of community desires. The development of project budgets and timelines and the regard for arts industry standards, that's another really common theme in the shifts in the arts department in the last several years. We're always doing research to make sure that our program structures and our budgets are within the realm of reason. So we wanted to bring that into the guidelines as well. As we're looking at public art and thinking about budgets, it's really imperative that we are being good stewards of the resources that we're fortunate to have. And so that seemed like something that was worth putting in the guidelines and to say that in black and white. And then also this final point starts to point to the purpose of public art. And so we felt that was really important as well, to say that, that yes, we are beautifying public areas. We're enhancing quality of life. For people who live here, we're attracting people to visit who maybe are just here for a weekend or a couple of weeks. But then I think it also points to the economic development capacity of the arts. And that is really important for us to have in this document as well. So while we're talking about economic development, it seems wise to take a moment to look at the public art funding. So funding for the public art program comes from multiple sources. The first one by now is probably familiar to most people in the room. The 1% for Arts Fund was established in 2004. This is 1% of capital improvement projects comes to the 1% for Arts Fund and is used to collect works of permanent value to the city of Moscow. So that's one source of funding. Another potential source is grants and donations and community partnerships. We've had an experience with funding from all of these different sources. And so these are different ways that we can bring public art into the collection. Approaches to prioritizing that funding are contained in the guidelines as well. One of the major components of running the public art program in a way that's transparent and understandable to the public, to city staff and city leadership is the idea of location and site selection. The first, all but the last point are contained in the existing public art guidelines. And so these points are essentially ensuring that the artwork will be seen by as many people as possible, that it will have the most impact as is humanly possible. And then we've also got some conditions around it must be on public property and that it meets conditions appropriate to the type of funding that is supporting the public art installation. The last point is an addition in the 2021 guidelines, and that is that we're hoping to prioritize those locations that have already been identified in a public art master plan. That's by no means to say that the Arts Department and the Arts Commission wouldn't approach a location that's not on that public art master plan, but it would certainly be something that would come to council for council's direction. But these are just points that the Arts Commission will look at to assess whether a project is good to move forward with or not, and ultimately that direction would, of course, come from council. The update to the public art guidelines also includes a section about public art selection, and this, as you probably noticed, it's broken out to different parts of the collection, which are managed based on different selection methods, different selection criteria. So the criteria for a permanent collection artwork, such as the Homecoming, is very different from the criteria we would use to evaluate a vinyl wrap, for example. And so we've broken those out and made those selection methods and criteria specific to each collection. And a lot of what's happened here is we've formalized what has been done over the last 10 years since the initial public art guidelines document was created. So you'll see in the guidelines a more specific approach to also artist eligibility, selection panel membership, public input, those types of things. A lot of what this does too for the Arts Commission as they are working through their processes, it takes out a lot of the ambiguity and the, hey, what did we do last year? And so by having that in black and white and being able to revisit that annually, their work is going to become a lot more efficient, where they can focus more on creative solutions to bring to council, as opposed to curiosity about what the process is. Okay, you'll also see in these guidelines a reference to maintenance practices. I would say that the maintenance practices are described in detail in that public art maintenance plan that you saw on March 8th. And so that's the reason I wanted to call that out in this presentation, is to say that that's probably one of the biggest priorities for the public art program as a whole right now, is to really implement and make a lasting system out of sustainable maintenance of the collection. It's not to say that we're not interested in adding new pieces, it's just that taking care of what we have is really, really important. And then also you'll see in the guidelines that there's a reference to the Public Art Master Plan. This is a document for those who may not be familiar with it. This document is the third sort of pillar of the public art program foundations. It was created in collaboration with community development and the Arts Commission in 2015. Really grateful to everyone who worked on that document. And the Public Art Master Plan contains, among other things, the desired types of art we want to see in Moscow and that location prioritization. So that is definitely set for an update for hopefully this year. We're at least starting it this year. And that's a document where we gather a lot of public input on those locations and types of public art. So that's why it's one of the foundational points of reference for prioritizing locations, because the public has weighed in on it. Okay. At this point, if these guidelines are adopted, we would anticipate that there's greater program alignment with city code. The legal department did have the opportunity to look through the guidelines word for word and made sure that everything is aligned with city code. We're also always looking at arts industry standards, and then we anticipate that we're going to have a better system for artist and community vision alignment as well. This document is also going to be a really nice foundation for art staff and MAC members as we increase transparency and consistency in our selection and criteria for when we're bringing pieces into the collection. I will always be excited to talk about maintenance, and so I will. This is something that, as we're moving into that elevated approach to maintenance of the public art collection, the guidelines are going to help us with that. As you've noticed, we're starting to update all of these foundational documents for the public art program. The intent is to start to move these documents forward, keeping them fresh, keeping them in alignment with the program as we move along. So hopefully all of these will come into alignment with one another. And then finally, annual updates and keep everyone's awareness fresh about what it is we're doing with the public art program, what its value is to the community, and how really public art serves Moscow. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Questions?
Yeah, I have one question, Megan. Are there any public art displays that we have either showing right now or in storage that don't meet the standards right now that you have to do something about?
Standards as in,
Like you talked about the city codes or the standards that you follow for public art. So do we have anything old that might need updated or can't show because they don't meet the code or standards now?
no, I wouldn't say that there aren't artworks in the collection that aren't up to city code. It's the alignment with city code is more about the references to other parts of the code.
Okay.
So references to the areas of code that deal with the Arts Commission, for example, those have been all updated. But in terms of what the areas of concern with the public art collection, there are definitely some maintenance pieces we need to catch up with, but there's nothing that is a giant blaring.
Sure. And then to follow up on that, what happens, and I'm sorry if I'm in the weeds just a little bit, but what happens if you have something in your collection, maybe a sculpture or something that you want to display again, that may be damaged and that artist is no longer around? Are you able to do any minor fixes to it?
Yeah, that's one of the major concerns with art conservation is what happens if the artist is no longer living, which is the case for some of the pieces in our collection. The intent is always to connect with the artist, to ask, hey, we would like to make conservation is required. What are your approaches? Or to invite the artist to come and complete that conservation project. If not, really the best practice is to hire a conservator to come and look at the piece in the collection and to make a recommendation. For us really truly to be as right as possible in that situation, we need to have the best records possible of the as-built information, the finishes, what the footings look like, what the materials are, so that we can restore that work to as close to original condition as possible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think everything you've brought a lot of needed, we know that Moscow has been the heart of the arts and had this great collection and all these wonderful projects going on, but to do this side of things, it's great that it's something that you enjoy, because I think it's challenging and it's not always an artist's forte, so I think you've done a good job with that.
Thank you.
I just appreciate the language that you're giving us in the conservatorship and those statements that you just gently explained to us what would happen. I appreciate that you're helping those of us who live outside of that world to understand and to know the steps and make it clearer for us. So I know that it is no small feat, but it's much appreciated.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So I think we're recommending approval of the public art guidelines.
Yep.
And,
Madam Chair, consent or
so,
consent agenda or regular?
yeah,
Sure.
consent would be great.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
And one point of clarification,
Yes.
Madam Chair, if I may. On the personnel policy updates, was the intent of the committee to have that go on the consent agenda with the updates that had been designated?
Yeah.
I thought we said bringing it to council.
You
Further
know,
discussion.
I think we did not clarify that. We have,
I'd be happy consent.
My
What do you think,
understanding
Gina?
was we were going to do it and bring it to council. Now, do we need to go through all of that? I don't know.
well, Jen, how about we have it on the regular agenda? I think all of the counselors have been present for the presentation today, so more for just an overview for the public, and if there are any remaining questions, which I anticipate there probably would not be many since we were all present here.
Yeah,
You
sure.
feel
Yeah.
comfortable with that?
Yeah.
You're muted, Jen.
Another thought, I know that there's some public hearings and such that may be coming up. I haven't looked at future agendas. If putting it on the consent agenda and then pulling it to regular, also an option, depending on what that feedback is in the CCSR. I'm available and happy to do either, but whatever works best for the council. Yeah, I did say bring it back
We
to
have-
council,
we
but I
have a
didn't
fairly
say
populated
how.
agenda
And
for the
that-
next council
I should
meeting,
have
and
said that.
so
I apologize.
if there was a desire to do it that way, it could be pulled by any of the council members. If there was something that merited further discussion, if that's how the council chose to go, but we can also provide a summary if that's what you'd prefer at the council meeting.
Well, I think since we are all here, if